Good morning. My name is Sean Avery. I'm the president of the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, and I have the privilege today of introducing Maurice Jones, our keynote speaker. I have his 42-page bio here, but I am not going to read the whole thing, so please go to the QR code to get it all. Sorry, Maurice. Maurice A. Jones is the founder and CEO of MJ Connects, a professional and business services firm that provides customer acquisition, fundraising, economic mobility, and other services to government, nonprofit, and for-profit clients. Prior to launching MJ Connects, Maurice was the CEO of 110, a coalition of leading chief executives and their companies who are coming together to upskill, hire, promote 1 million black talent over the next 10 years who do not yet have a 4-year degree into a family-sustaining jobs with opportunities for advancements. Prior to 110, Maurice was the president and CEO of LISC, one of the country's largest organizations providing projects to revitalize communities and catalyze economic opportunities to residents. During his time, Maurice led the company's effort to expand its footprints into the southern part of the company and grow its assets from $1 billion to $2 billion, including a little bit of that money came to me for our FOC, so thank you very much for that. He previously served as Secretary of Commerce and Trade for the Commonwealth of Virginia and as Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Before his appointment at HUD, Maurice was president of Pilot Media, the largest print and digital organization in Hampton Roads. Maurice received a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Hampden, Sydney, and attended Oxford University in England on a Rhodes Scholarship, where he received a Master of Philosophy in International Relations. He later received a Juris Doctorate from the University of Virginia. Sorry about that whooping you got this weekend. Sorry about that. Please join me in welcoming Maurice Jones.
Well, good morning. Oh, come on, seriously? Good morning.
Good morning.
I've never been introduced and said sorry about that whooping. I'm going to get him back for that. That's all right. Well, I am delighted to be with you this morning. I'm delighted to talk about transit and business. Mr. Harrell, thank you. And I don't know where Noelle is, but she's been terrific, including making sure that I woke up this morning in time to be here. Well, look, let me share a couple of stories with you and talk about this subject of transit and workforce development and try to come at this question this way. Years ago, I worked in state government. I was the Secretary of Commerce and Trade, and in that job, my job was to attract as many companies as we could possibly attract to the state that were going to add jobs to our field of play, if you will, and also help our existing companies who are here grow and add jobs. I'll never forget, within the first week of going to work, I sat down with a company that was considering coming to a rural part of the state of Virginia. And this company sits down in front of me and has this huge map of where it was thinking of locating its business operation. And the CEO put his finger down at that spot, and then he drew a circle around that point that supposedly represented about a 60-minute commute from those places to his job. And he said, okay, tell me about your workforce within this 60-mile radius of my proposed job site. He said, basically, if you can prove to me, if you can convince me that you've got a workforce that is within that 60-mile circumference, then you got the deal. it was a very early lesson for me that economic development was actually about workforce development. That, and by the way, prior to this conversation, I had put on the table for this prospective investor, if you will, in the state, a bunch of money, a bunch of financial incentives, a site where they could locate their business, all of which was helpful. But the key ingredient, the thing that was going to win this or not for the state, was actually whether I could produce the workforce that that person needed to operate and to grow. So very early lesson for me was, yep, there is definitely no difference between a workforce that's work ready and trying to bring companies to the Commonwealth. And by the way, the gentleman said, and look, what I need to know is that you can get that workforce ready at business speed, right? Fast forward to a job that I just left. I was the CEO of something called 110. 110's mission was to prepare, well, essentially to get hired and promoted 1 million black talent across the country who didn't yet have four-year degrees into jobs that paid at least a living wage. I was working with a big pharmaceutical company in Pennsylvania who had jobs in the pharmaceutical facility, mostly manufacturing jobs that paid minimum wage, a living wage and beyond. And we were trying to provide a pipeline of talent that mostly came from North Philly. Well, the location of the job was in Montgomery County, which if you had a vehicle, you could drive to easily within 45 minutes. But the residents in the parts of Philly that we were working with and that we had found a trainer for had to take 2 buses, 90 minutes each way to go to and from work. Well, guess what? We couldn't scale that, right? We could train folks, we could get them prepared for the work, but we could not make the work opportunity, even with the great wage, the great income, we couldn't make it attractive enough to the employees for them to say, yep, I'm going to take 2 buses every day for 3 hours. And so what we ended up doing in the end was hiring a transportation company to take folks to and from work who were not able to do so through their own vehicle. But that was not a scalable solution, right? The scalable solution that we were attempting to work with the 2 county, or the county and the city on, was reliable, efficient public transportation to transport a workforce that was ready to do the work to an employer who was ready to receive them in an efficient and a reliable way. And so the second lesson for me was that you had to have, that jobs and training were not enough. That unless we had the ability to efficiently and reliably get people to the job, the rest of the investment at the end of the day was not going to be optimized. Third story for you. I was working at another job. By the way, if my grandfather heard this talk, he would say, well, boy, you just can't keep a job. I don't know what else you were telling the people, but it's a lot of jobs. I have a defense, but I won't make it today. But I used to work for an organization called LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. By the way, there is a LISC office here that I start, and so I was happy that that happened. But we were working in DC, and we still work in DC, and we got a call from DC officials about the eastern part of DC, and if you know DC well, there's a big difference between the east and the west. And what was happening on the east was the largest shelter for homeless folks that was at that time present on the eastern part, and this has been over 5 years now, was closing. And the city wanted to know if we could be helpful. And we took a look and decided that we thought we could be helpful with a lot of partners, but that the way to be helpful, the best way to be helpful was not to start another construction of a homeless shelter, right? But in fact, to figure out how best to get folks living in a pretty isolated part of the city to employment opportunities, right? It's just that simple. And what we ended up doing after having multiple conversations with multiple parts of the city and the community was to actually build a facility, and we used tax credits, and we used bank loans, and we used grant dollars, and we got land donated from the city. We built a multi-use facility right on a bus and subway line. And that multi-use facility had affordable housing, it had child care, it had workforce development, it had a piece of a federal health care center. It had multiple partners who were addressing the totality or a lot of the lives of the people that we were trying to be helpful to. And it worked. We ended up having this facility on the transit line. And what happened afterwards, because people were coming to get their child care services met at this facility, they were coming to the dentist at this facility, they were coming to get workforce training at this facility. Well, guess what? Small retail businesses also decided that they wanted to be near this facility. A park developed pretty close to this facility. What was a gas station ended up going out of business, and a supermarket was developed right next to this facility. And for us, the real lesson here was that if we could find an efficient way to get the prospective workers in this piece of the city to and from destinations of choice, that we could really create economic development in this part of the city. And that growth around that one facility has continued even to this day. Now, it took curating, it took thinking beyond a homeless shelter and thinking about what you really needed to do to get people to opportunity. But once you had that vision, once people actually bought into that and understood that it was just not enough just to have jobs located at this place, that you needed childcare there, and that you needed health care there, and you needed workforce there, it just made sense, and it works. And it was a lesson that we took to every place after that we went to try to work. COVID is still with us, but I remember in 2020 when we were attempting to figure out what to do for people in the midst of COVID who were losing work, or whose work was interrupted, or who were working remotely, that it became really clear for us that there were certain workers that were never going to be able to work remotely, right? And that those workers still needed to get to and from work. And so the importance of transit for, in this area, the shipyards, the manufacturers, the healthcare, the folks who were in the sanitation space. I mean, watching the fact that even COVID could not interrupt the needs of those folks for transit to and from work was another lesson for us, that you've got to have efficient public transit for most ordinary people, no matter what's going on. And that we need to, even in this age when things are becoming more and more remote, we still need efficient and we need accessible transit. Let me get out of your way on this note. So there's a group of folks, economists, the headquarters of this group are at Harvard right now, but they've got economists from all over the world now working on basically looking at, well, I'm gonna put it this way, looking at the American dream, looking at what are the chances of a young child being born in the lowest 20th percentile of income families in a place and reaching the highest 20th percentile of income in families as an adult. And let me give you some data that I think will, if none of the other stuff, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but if none of the other things about the importance of transit beyond just moving folks rings home to you, I think this one, I hope this one will. It turns out that if you're in Hampton Roads, and you're a child born in Hampton Roads, and you're in the bottom 20th percentile, a family that's in the bottom 20th percentile in income, that the chances of your actually being able to reach the top 20th percentile in your lifetime is about 6%. 6%. Lowest 20th percentile to highest in your lifetime. That same child, born in Canada, in the lowest 20th percentile, has over a 13% chance of reaching the top 20th percentile in her lifetime, born in Canada. Born in the UK, about a 9% chance. This is hard medicine, and people can dispute my interpretation here, and it would be reasonable. But my interpretation right now is, through some data, you have a better chance of reaching the American dream being born in Canada than being born in Suffolk. None of us, even if I'm close to right about that, none of us should feel anything other than a sense of urgency about changing that. Right? That's crazy. But go look at the data for yourselves. It's called Opportunity Insights. And they've done a whole atlas they call the Opportunity Atlas, and they've mapped the chances of people basically being born in poverty and escaping it in their lifetimes. And it turns out that you have a different chance in America depending on where you were born. That place is, in fact, the most important, the most powerful determinant of your success in life economically. Right? And it turns out that there are places that do this well, and there are common ingredients in these places of high mobility. They have a big middle class, so they have less segregation of income. They have less segregation along lines of race. They have they have high quality public schools and access to post-secondary education. And this is the one I want to, actually no, one more. They have, this one was interesting for me. They have a bigger presence, relatively speaking, of two-parent families. Now, the interesting thing was, the piece about that wasn't that whether or not you grew up in a two-parent family. It was whether you had two-parent families in the community. And they are still trying to do the work on that. But the last piece, and it turns out, the most influential piece, the most powerful determinant of economic and social mobility for a person, is whether they're connected to people who are in a different economic class than them. Whether they're living in a place that has intentionally curated chances for people who are in different classes to be in fellowship, whether that's on the playground or in houses of worship or in jobs or in the theater or in a park, but who has actually created the most real interconnection amongst folks that cross class lines. Turns out that those communities are the ones where the American dream is most alive and well and vibrant. You cannot be connected across class lines or across any lines if you don't have the transit to do so. It turns out that one of the most important determinants of keeping the dream alive is whether you have high quality, efficient, reliable, accessible, ways to put people from different walks of life in community. So if we don't, for any other reason, have more of a sense of urgency of having the best transit in the country, I hope the fact that we all want this region to be the #1 place in the country to keep the dream alive will bring home to us that we've got to keep working on making sure we've got the best transit system in the country. Have a good day. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm told I can, if I've sufficiently confused you and you have a question or two that I can try to answer. Yes, sir.
So zip code does make a difference
Absolutely.
in all areas like health, education, success. Is there a way that transit can also maybe close that gap in terms of zip codes making a difference?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint that, look, let me give you an example. So I did some work in Milwaukee, and what we were trying to do in Milwaukee was to make sure that the children there had access to high quality recreation fields, right? And so it turned out that depending on the community you were living in, you may or may not have a park within walking distance. But that there were some incredible parks there, and the NFL was donating millions of dollars to refurbish parks. And so what we needed to do was, yes, let's bring parks to people, but let's also figure out how to get people to the parks. That was all about transit. And that's just one small example of, yes, I think transit is a way not to eliminate zip codes, but transit is a way to mingle zip codes and connect zip codes, and that will matter. That will make a difference. Absolutely. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
How do we help people to understand that a holistic approach to homelessness is not a pathway to socialism, but there are social programs that will provide a return on investment?
So look, I think you start with, so the same group of folks that I talked about, Raj Chetty and his group, they did this study on, I think they ended up calling it Missing Einsteins, right? They did this study on how much a community would actually prosper if we actually invested in creating more Einsteins from families and children who were not amongst the affluent, who were actually poor, who were homeless, etc. And you know what they showed was that there was genius everywhere, and if we could produce more opportunity, you wouldn't just produce more opportunity for that individual, but that the whole community actually would be better off. In fact, the whole country. I mean, what they talked about were all these missing Einsteins in communities across the country that we were missing that would make us more innovative, more competitive globally. And so I think you've got to show folks that we've got to, as my music teacher used to say, we got to care about every note. And if we do, we won't just perfect a note, we will make the orchestra sound much better. And that's what it is. So we can't afford for folks to look at fighting homelessness as a social issue only, right? It is, at the end of the day, an economic imperative for all of us. The more Einsteins we have, the better all of our quality of lives will be. I think we just got to keep making that case. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. That premise seems to be something to discover all by itself, because as you unfold that, you know, if you're talking transit just for jobs, or transit to Jamestown, to Williamsburg, to, you know, recreational things, that's a consideration as well. But you have to consider now schools do not take kids to Jamestown and things like that. So can you expound a little bit, maybe categorically, transit to create that connection, but not just for jobs? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Hey, look, you need transit not just for jobs. You need transit for childcare, right? You need transit for health care, right? You need transit for recreation. I mean, you need transit, high quality transit, to have a high quality life, right? And as I was trying to say, the jobs piece is not enough, right? You can have the best, most efficient, most economical transit from point X to point Y for the job. But if that family doesn't have high quality child care as well somewhere along the route, it's just not gonna work, right? That's what we learned in all of these places where we were working, was that we had to make sure that we were understanding the multiple identities of people, right? And that they didn't just have to take care of the job piece, that the rest of life had to be accommodated as well. And again, on this last piece, this piece about being a place that is much better when it comes to economic mobility, unless you can connect people gracefully, right? We will not be good at that. And so, for me, to me, I mean, this goes to the heart of the mission of the country, right? I mean, the vision was that you could be born in a log cabin and be president, or Hope, Arkansas, and be president, right? And it turns out that if you can't get that boy from Hope to, you pick the spot through transit, the chances of him being president aren't very high, and in fact are getting tougher.
Yeah, I just want to make one more comment that we have children, while they can see the world with their phones, we have children in all of our cities who haven't been out of their city. I talked to a young lady the other day, and this young lady had never been out of Portsmouth. And as a former school teacher and a school board member, it concerns me that you have that situation where they have the world, they can see it in their hands, but a bunch of these kids haven't been out of Norfolk. And so how do we create that in the concept of what you talked about?
Yeah, you got to do that and give those kids from Portsmouth more of a chance to come to Norfolk. Yeah, I'm getting the, do I do this or do I leave? Yes, I am very aware of who this young lady is.
I would just say that HRT has a Freedom Pass for children 13 and older. They can ride anywhere on transit in any of our cities.
That's great.